Okay, hello everyone. It's Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Tuesday, the 22nd of March 2022. And today's topic is Ketanji Jackson and critical race theory. When Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Jackson was growing up as a little girl, she recalls that her parents kept a copy of Derrick Bell's Faces at the Bottom of the Well on the family living room coffee table. In 1971, Bell became Harvard's first tenured Black professor. His book, Race, Racism, and American Law, has been continually in print since 1973 and is considered foundational in the field of critical race theory. Unfortunately, CRT is merely a glorified term for anti-white racism, or it's really just racism. It's just another term for racism, in this case, mostly against whites. The theory teaches that the most important thing about you and me is not our behavior or character, but it is our race and gender. If you are a white male, you are an oppressor of Blacks and women, whether you realize it or not. If you admit it, you are shamed. If you deny it, your very denial discloses your guilt, according to critical race theory. The purpose of indoctrinating critical race theory is to coerce false confessions from white males, because as they are repeated over time, the confessions can be made, the confessors can be made to believe them. There is no escape from the grand fraud if it becomes the accepted standard of how our society evolved. It is a catch-22. CRT postulates that history is a perpetual conflict between oppressors and victims. White males are the supreme oppressors who victimize Blacks and even white women. CRT proponents falsely argue that if it is not taught in school, children will never learn about historical incidents of racism and slavery. That's nonsense. Anybody that has went to public school in the last 60 years knows that. CRT advocates would have the public believe that such topics have not been discussed in public schools over the last 60 years. Moreover, they argue without CRT, students may grow into adults who believe that slavery and racism are good. It's nonsense. It's poison. Partly because of Derrick Bell's phony concept of, quote, interest convergence, close quote, CRT believers always take the most sinister interpretation of American and Western history. In the 1970s, Bell claimed he discovered a diabolical method of white suppression that predecessors had missed and elaborately termed it, quote, interest convergence, close quote. As an example, he argued that the 1954 Brown versus Topeka Board of Education Supreme Court ruling ending racial segregation in schools resulted more from the self-interest of elite whites than from a desire to help Blacks. Since both Blacks and white elites interpreted racial integration as beneficial to their respective interests, their interests, quote, converged, close quote. When he examined the Brown case background, Bell believed that the NAACP had been litigating school desegregation suits for years with little result. Why, he asked, had the Supreme Court unexpectedly given Blacks everything they had been asking for in the Brown case? He concluded that white considerations over global and domestic politics, not altruism or desire to do the right thing, prompted the court's ruling. In Bell's analysis, elite whites feared a Black racial uprising if America refused to integrate her schools. In other words, without that threat, the whites would have done nothing. Ketanji Jackson may have absorbed some of Bell's poisonous fantasy. Remember, this is the book on the coffee table in the family home. She has been a member since, being in Washington, she has been a member of the Georgetown Day School, that's GDS, Board of Trustees since 2019, and part of that community for another 5 or 10 years prior to that. It's an institution that promotes critical race theory and the so-called associated correctives, such as, quote, anti-racism, which is a glorified word for dictatorially enforced equality of outcomes collectively by groups, as opposed to equality of opportunity for individuals. It was originated by Ibram X. Kendi, who argues that capitalism is essentially racist. He also argues, quote, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination, close quote. Georgetown Day School's website also details how, quote, how they, quote, mandate an annual anti-racism education for all faculty and staff, close quote, and that they provide, quote, professional development funds to support registration for and travel to professional conferences, including conferences focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, close quote. And that's just an alternate expression for critical race theory. GDS's high school tuition is $47,000 annually. Now, unlike many Blacks of her age, Ketanji grew up in a 2-parent household and lived in a prosperous section of Miami where she attended the same high school as Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Now, putting her on the Supreme Court does not make the court look more like America. Instead, it makes the court look more like the privileged American classes that have been leading us down this crooked path for years. Now, to get more understanding of what critical race theory means for the future of America, consider getting my book, The Dreadful Frauds, Critical Race Theory and Identity Politics. This is an important one. If you want to fight critical race theory, the information that you can get from this book will help you do it. I mean, for example, one of the things that this diversity, equity, inclusion teaching is doing in our public schools is it's teaching the teachers that they do not want to discipline students of color with disproportionate impact. In other words, if 50% of those who are disciplined happen to be Black, then the purpose of the schools are reducing that number by simply not punishing the Blacks if they continue to assault whites or Asians or others, non-Blacks, at the same rate, because the school's enforcement people do not want to create a situation where critics can say, well, their disciplinary actions have a disparate impact on Blacks, therefore you're racist. And what's really happening, so to avoid that disparate impact, what they're doing is they just are not punishing students that are creating assaults because they don't want, if those students are Black, to create a disparate impact of punishment among the Blacks as a group. So when they don't punish those students, and most of them, of course, are the repeat offenders, most students, Black or white, tend to be law-abiding and obey their teachers, but nonetheless, if they aren't punished, they just simply repeat the assault. So the action that you can take, if you read this, what you can learn is get the school districts or get your local government or the state government to pass a law that if a student creates an assault on another student and is not punished for it, that the victim of that assault can go to a private school, and the state or the school board or the school district must pay that fee. And that's going to stop that kind of crap. Okay, that's our show for today, and thank you for watching.